Anthony got reincarnated as a goddamn weak level 1 ant in a dungeon, but he evolved into the dungeon's most feared boss. Guys, please smash that 4,000 likes and hit that subscribe button if you're new. If you want to support me, I know you got this. Now let's continue. The story begins with Anthony naked, feeling like he's drifting in the air. It was super cozy and comfortable until a deep sound woke him up. He thought it was his dad, but nope. It was a transparent window greeting him. The first time in his life anyone greeted him with such kindness and manners. Then, the next moment, the window whispered that he had died, flipping Anthony's world upside down. He finally realized the sound wasn't his dad's. Confused, he wondered, where the hell is he now? The last thing he remembered was being at home reading books. Then, with a jolt of realization, he thought, is this heaven? But if this was heaven, where were the hot angels, the food, and the big mansions? But the voice told him to calm down, saying he'd soon be reborn into a new world and get another shot at life. As Anthony listened, a jolt of realization hit him. He shouted, "This deep, gruff voice sounds exactly like that legendary figure dressed all in white, Gandalf!" But before Anthony could do anything, the voice announced he'd now be reborn on the planet named Pangera. Suddenly, a window appeared in front of Anthony, displaying his stats. Curious and excited, thinking he'd wield legendary magic, Anthony checked his stats, only to find his magic power was 0, and his skills were weird: dig, acid shot, grip, and bite. But it was not the end. His world turned upside down, once again when he noticed his species was not human, but an ant, a hatchling worker. Ant, at that. He wondered if he'd ruined someone's life when he was alive, but then he remembered he was a shut-in loser with no friend, so that was impossible. Furious and angry, before he could say anything, his vision started to blur, his body feeling weird, like it was being squeezed from all sides. It was because Anthony was inside an egg. Though he didn't want to believe it, he realized he really was being reborn as an ant. He started to feel his legs and, with all his might, forced them out of the egg. Finally, after a long few hours, he emerged, exhausted and tired. To Anthony, it still felt like a nightmare. He had gone from a man who kept ants as pets to being an ant himself. As Anthony started to check his surroundings, he noticed everything was pitch black around him, and his vision was also blurry and not good compared to when he was human. He was only able to see a few centimeters ahead clearly. So Anthony decided to explore, and after a while, he noticed a bright light. Excited, he decided to follow the bright light. As he continued to move forward, he started to feel weird in his antennae. He started to feel movements, and from the muddy smell, he figured out he must be somewhere underground. But for some weird reason, he was not able to smell any pheromone. Normally, ants work in groups, and as ants don't have vocals, they communicate through the smell of their body juice. Well, Anthony in this life didn't want to be a loner. He wanted a female ant girlfriend. He was determined to find one. So for hours, he dedicatedly followed the bright light, and finally he smelled an ant's smell. Excited, Anthony hurriedly ran to the end of the bright light, only to be shocked and bewildered. Well, he did find an ant, but it got smashed by this ugly, fat croco monster with a creepy smile. After that, it started to eat the ant with its razor-sharp teeth like eating candy, tearing every part of the ant's body, and the ant died a painful death. Anthony, on the other hand, was watching this horrible scene from the sideline, terrified. He felt like peeing his pants, which he wasn't even wearing. Then Anthony noticed a female ant under the feet of the croco monster. She was crying. Anthony felt really bad. With a serious face, there was only one thing he could do in this situation: run with all his might. Anthony started to run as fast as he could, but there was a dead end. For now, he was safe from that ugly monster, but what if there were more terrifying monsters in this cave? Anthony was getting panicky. He started brainstorming, thinking about what a smart ant would do in this situation. Just then, he realized ants also dig underground, so he started to dig the ground with his little hand, but it wasn't working. Then he remembered ants use their mandibles to dig, so he also started to dig with his head, and it worked. In an instant, Anthony made a huge underground tunnel, dug very deep inside the ground, and finally blocked the entrance so no one could come in. Now, finally, after a long time, Anthony took a sigh of relief. Laying there, he was deep in thought. Normally, new ants should be born inside a colony surrounded by other adult ants, and until he woke up, the only ants he saw became the food of that ugly fat monster. So Anthony concluded that the Croco monster must have been targeting the ants and must have killed all the ants in this area. Just then, he remembered there was a status window he saw before he got reborn. So he wondered if this was a game-like situation, then maybe he would be able to open some sort of menu. Anthony stood up, raised his arms, and started shouting for the menu to open up. But nothing happened, and he felt like a fool doing this in such a dramatic manner. Then he remembered the menu's name was Status Window. So once again, in a dramatic manner, he shouted, "Status Window, open!" And voila, the status window really appeared in front of him, surprising him. Now, looking at the stats, he was confused if these numbers were really high or low, so he moved his attention toward his skill. There, the grip skill confused. He thought, "Will I be able to shoot web like Spider-Man and swing on walls?" But as he tapped onto the grip skill, a hologram appeared in front of him explaining that using this skill, he could hold on to any surface and object without letting go. For example, walking on wall. This really fascinated Anthony, and once again, he started to praise Lord Gandalf, saying his beard is the most luxurious, his eyebrows the most bristly. Anthony was really very happy that he had the ability to access crucial information with a single thought. After that, he checked his other skill. Well, he already knew about the dig skill and grip skill. Third, he can shoot deadly acid from his mouth, which can melt anything it comes in contact with. And fourth, the bite skill, which means he can bite and break tough objects. Now that he knew about all his skills, the most crucial thing that was necessary to survive in this world was information. Like, where the hell is he? And what kind of creatures live in this place other than him and croco beasts? So, Anthony's next objective will be to explore the areas and gather information. But just the thought of encountering unknown, more powerful monsters was enough to shake Anthony's little PP. But Anthony somehow calmed himself down. He knew that panicking would only lead to his destruction. Still, he felt hopeless. He couldn't survive in this situation with just these skills. But just then, the system asked Anthony if he wanted to use his skill points, which once again lightened his mood, and he again started to lick Gandalf's ass. Started to praise Gandalf that his beard will always be fluffy. Now, in front of Anthony, there was one skill point through which he could gain a new skill, and one biomass point through which he could modify his body parts. First, he went to check all the available skills. There he found 5 skills, which made it hard to choose from. If he chose Dash, he would be able to run fast from his enemies. Tunnel Sense would make it easier for him to explore, and Chomp would be a great upgrade of Bite and could act like an attack skill. But as ants are generally the smallest and weakest in the food chain, none of these would actually help in survival realistically. So, he chose the Stealth skill, and for body modification, he chose better eyesight. Suddenly, his eyes started to burn like they were on fire, and the intensity increased with time. It felt like his eyes would pop out. Well, for Anthony, it was really frustrating to only be able to see a few centimeters, but finally, after a long hour, the pain stopped, and as he opened his eyes, he didn't feel any changes as he was still in a small tunnel. Now, all prepared, he decided it was time to explore. After a while, in front of him were 2 tunnels. The first one led to where he encountered the Croco monster, so he chose the second tunnel. After some time, he started to see the exit of the tunnel, and as his eyesight was better, he was able to see some sort of twisting and branching blue-like veins in the walls. Curious, he slowly crawled outside the cave, but what he saw shocked him to his core. There was a huge cave, but in there was a huge, ferocious, deadly monster crawling, which he was still not able to see clearly as his vision was only clear up to 1.5 meters. As each individual ant has terrible sense, they normally act together to kill and defeat larger prey. but Anthony was all alone. So now his first priority was to improve his eyesight until he would be able to spot a twitching cockroach from 5 meters. And yes, I don't know why. A twitching cockroach, I am also confused. But just then, he noticed a weird sound in his antennae. Curious, he decided to follow the sound and crawled along the cave's ceiling to avoid getting caught in the eyesight of the monster. But even after crawling for a while, it was still difficult for him to focus with his blurry vision, and the strange blue veins were making it even harder for him to concentrate. Then finally, after crawling onto a sharp-hanging stone, he noticed a drop of water and realized there was a very big pond, and these strange blue lines were the reflection of the pond. But the sound was not from the pond. Then, as he checked his surroundings, he got terrified, seeing bloodthirsty monsters. And just when a wolf was about to notice Anthony, he barely hid behind a rock. Well, it was too close. One mistake, and he would have died. Now, it was finally the right time for Anthony to test his new skill, stealth. As he whispered stealth in his mind, the skill got activated and his body became transparent. This was fascinating for Anthony. He wondered if there was any magic power needed to maintain this skill. Then he remembered he didn't have any MP, so he decided to use this skill for a long time to test its limit. Using stealth, Anthony started to observe the beasts closely. First, he came close toward the wolf-like monster, and then he noticed this was not any normal wolf. The wolf was a mixture of a wolf and a lizard. Then he noticed his worst enemy, the home wrecker, baby snatcher, and girlfriend killer, the crocobeast. But then Anthony noticed something strange. Why weren't any of these dangerous creatures attacking each other? Anthony wondered, did the ant colony not get along with the monsters in the cave? Well, Anthony wouldn't be getting any answers by staying in one place, so he decided to move a little closer. As he also wanted to check out that long black monster, his only strategy was to move slowly and steadily. And finally, after many tough minutes, he started to feel tired. But just then, the system notified him that his stealth skill leveled up to level 2. This made Anthony extremely happy, thinking he must have traveled a significant distance, but in reality, he hadn't even traveled 5 meters. Without knowing this, he was extremely happy, thinking his suspicion was correct that he didn't need magic power to use skills and that his skills could be trained by using them. It was like killing 2 birds with 1 arrow. He was also increasing his stealth skill while gathering information. Then he finally came close to that long, thick-looking monster. From afar, it looked like a clump, but as he came a little closer, Anthony vomited on the spot because of the foul smell, and, well, they were having sex. Now, as Anthony saw this unholy scene, he needed holy water to cleanse his eyes, and the last monster was a thick lizard with spikes on its body. Well, Anthony, seeing them, started to give a wicked smile. He had a very good plan, but for that to work, he needed more information. So for the next few hours, Anthony, while hidden, observed each and every movement and behavior of all the monsters. After 1 hour, he noticed the first pair of monsters to leave. The water pool was the centipede monster and the crocobeast. But strangely, they headed to the same spot. Well, the croca might really like to play with the naughty centipedes. Then, after 2 hours, the lizard wolf beast went into a small tunnel in the south, and lastly, the spiky lizard dug a hole and went inside the wall. Now, all the required information was gathered, and with a wicked smile, Anthony's first target was the spiky lizard. Just then, the system notified him that his stealth skill had leveled up to level 3, which made Anthony even happier. Well now, before the big fight, Anthony needed to do some more preparations. He needed his own house. So he activated his digging skill and started digging to make his own nest. Finally, after digging for a long time and shaping his nest, the system notified him his digging reached level 2, and he successfully created a level 1 nest. Anthony finally took a sigh of relief, and at this point, he realized although he didn't need MP to activate his skills, he really gets hungry the more skill he uses. And at this point, Anthony was just starving from hunger. Then the scene shifts, and we see Anthony, once again, climbed onto the same pointy rock and started to wait for the right opportunity to attack his prey. But at this point, he was just too damn hungry. His vision was getting blurry. His strength was leaving his body, and the only thought that was coming to his mind was all the delicious food from Earth: chocolate, cake, steak, bread, and the hunger was making his mind all foggy. To him, the croc-a-beast was looking like a delicious meat steak, and the centipede was looking like tasty noodles. Anthony had used way too long for the preparation of his next move. He studied each and every monster's behavior for a whole 2 days. While thinking all this, due to weakness, Anthony's grip loosened and he almost fell into the water. But the biggest mystery was this magical glowing pond. According to Anthony, this was not any normal water, so he had to be careful not to fall into it. But on the flip side, due to using his stealth and dig for the whole 2 days, his stealth leveled up to level 3 and his dig to level 3. Just then, Anthony felt a vibration, and it was the smell of his prey, the lizard monster. The time had finally come. This lizard monster lives alone and only crawls out from his cave each day to drink water. An isolated creature with predictable, slow movements. An easy prey. As the lizard monster came close to the pond, Anthony gave a really sinister smile. Using his stealth mode, he started following it, waiting for the right position to strike. The only thing Anthony had to be careful about was those pointy thorns. One strike and a hole would be punctured into his stomach. Finally, the moment came. As the lizard was drinking water, this was the moment Anthony had been waiting for. Anthony jumped high and used his acid throw, and green acid came from his mouth, burning the lizard's left arm. As the lizard was groaning, he was in immense pain. Anthony immediately activated his stealth mode and went into hiding, but the lizard was already aggroed onto Anthony, so he was able to see Anthony even in his stealth mode. The lizard, furious, started to climb the wall to eat Anthony, but was unable to climb due to his thick, fat body. Well, Anthony, on the other hand, from the ceiling started taunting the lizard. Even though the lizard is slow, it was able to climb walls, which is why Anthony first damaged its arm so its ability to climb would be destroyed. More furious, the lizard swung his tail and destroyed the entire wall, but Anthony jumped and dodged the attack and once again used acid spit on the head of the lizard. Now, at this point, the lizard was really in immense pain. He started to groan in pain, and in his last struggle, was attacking Anthony with his tail. But Anthony was easily able to dodge all his attacks. The fight was going in favor of Anthony, but he couldn't let this drag out any longer or other beasts might come and third-party them. The lizard was finally slowing down. His breath was getting slow. So, Anthony thought of coming a little closer, but the lizard, in his last effort, launched an ultra-fat attack with his tail, which almost blew Anthony's head off. Anthony barely dodged the attack. This made the lizard off balance, and seeing this chance, Anthony jumped onto the lizard's body, grabbed the lizard's ass, and started clapping him, grabbed the lizard's body tight, and started munching the lizard's head. The pain was so intense that the lizard fainted. Well, Anthony also didn't want to kill, but if he didn't, then he would die of hunger. Then once again, Anthony started to spit acid all over the lizard's body, and the system informed him that his acid shot leveled up to level 2. But still, after some time passed, the lizard didn't die. Now, Anthony didn't want to do this, but he had to. The next moment, Anthony used his bite skill and started to tear the lizard into pieces. And finally, after a long half hour of biting, the lizard finally died, and his bite skill also leveled up to level 3. Now, at this joyful moment, Anthony really felt victorious. All his hard work and effort were successful, but then he realized that in his past life he never did this much hard work to achieve anything. All he did was read books. But just then, the system notified Anthony that he had killed a level 2 Spinetta Lacertos. Anthony gained XP, reached level 2, and also gained 1 skill point. But something started to bug Anthony. The name of the lizard seemed to be written in Latin. Then he remembered his own species was written as Formica, which means wood ants in Latin. As Anthony's hobby was ant keeping, he used to read many books from which he remembered this name. So, Anthony thought if all the creatures are named in Latin, then his knowledge that he had would come in handy. Anthony started to get proud of himself for reading all those books. Finally, after all the thinking, Anthony's hunger grew even stronger, and voila, he instantly started to devour the lizard. But little did he know, the taste of the lizard was truly disgusting, and he instantly vomited everything he ate. It was like he was eating vomit. Although Anthony didn't want to, he somehow devoured the entire lizard monster. But just then, the voice of Gandalf startled him. The system notified him that Anthony had consumed a new source of biomass. So he gained 1 biomass point and also unlocked the basic profile of the lizard monster. This made Anthony weirdly happy, and he decided to head to his nest before other monsters might come due to the smell of blood. But while returning to his nest, he noticed the naughty centipede and other monsters, still drinking the mysterious water without even noticing that one of their comrades had gone missing. Several minutes later, Anthony finally reached his nest and opened his status window to check all the juicy skill points. Now, his HP was 30, his MP was still 0, and all his other stats had also increased significantly. Now there was a very tough decision to take. He only had 2 biomass points, so what to mutate? But well, he had already decided from the start that first, he would be upgrading his eyesight, so without any delay, he mutated his eyes, which consumed 2 biomass points. Once again, his eyes started to burn like hell. Even though he had experienced this once, it was still very painful. Finally, after a long hour, the pain stopped, and as Anthony slowly opened his eyes, his vision indeed became clearer than before, but compared to a human, it was still far worse. Now it was time for the skill point, but this was not such a tough choice as he already had a skill in mind, tunnel sense. There are too many unknowns in this cave, and tunnel sense would broaden his range, allowing him to explore further and still make it back to his nest without any issue. So he instantly used his skill point to get tunnel sense, and as soon as he did, he started to feel really weird. He felt like water was running through his hair in a shower, except it was happening inside his head. And for some reason, his little PP was getting more sensitive. Finally, after a few minutes, the system notified that he had successfully acquired tunnel sense. This sensation was so calming that Anthony started to feel sleepy, and, well, he slept on the bed he made with leaves he had gathered. While Anthony was in deep sleep, he felt like he was flying and sleeping on a cloud, and suddenly he fell from the cloud. Startled, he woke up only to find he was falling in reality, and he fell on his face on the ground. Now, fully awake, it was time to explore more and find his next target. But before that, with a wicked smile, Anthony wanted to try something else. Anthony again, with a dramatic tone, shouted, "Unlock!" while making a heart. But, well, nothing happened. After that, he tried many keywords like access profile and open sesame, which meant access profile in Latin, but nothing happened. Well, Anthony was trying to open the information tab of the lizard monster he killed. Just yesterday, Gandalf's voice informed him that he had unlocked the basic information of the lizard beast. However, he was struggling to access the right keyword to open the info tab. Just then, Anthony got an idea, and once again, while falling from the ceiling in a dramatic manner, he shouted, "Spinetta Lacertos!" and the info of the lizard monster appeared in front of Anthony, making him really excited and happy. But there was nothing special. The only info that was present was that the spine of the lizard contains venom and everything was hidden. This made Anthony really frustrated, but he pulled himself together, thinking, perhaps he will get more info if he killed and consumed more thorny lizards. Oh, the English translation of Spinetta Lacertos is thorny lizard. So just like that, Anthony, while singing, started to crawl toward his next prey. After a while, Anthony reached his favorite place, the same pointy rock, while singing, and once again started to observe the entire area. He didn't notice anything special, but because his eyesight had upgraded, now the pool seemed to be glowing brighter than before. But there was one thing that was bugging the bug Anthony. Since day one, Anthony had done all kinds of workouts and hardships, but until now, he hadn't felt any thirst. Yet all the other monsters always come to drink from the pool, and since he is also a monster, why isn't he feeling thirsty? So now, Anthony's main goal was to find the secret of this mysterious water. To Anthony, there are two possibilities. Either he is different from other monsters and doesn't feel thirst, or the other monsters also don't feel thirst, but they drink this water because there is something different about this water. To test his theory, Anthony decided to also drink the waiter. He slowly started crawling toward the waiter. He didn't want to get found out by them. But as he came close to the wolf lizard, the wolf sensed Anthony, but suddenly the wolf stopped, all scared and panicky. This confused Anthony, but as he turned back, there was the pervy centipede waiting for him. Anthony was in deep trouble, but surprisingly, nothing happened. They didn't attack Anthony, but just went past him calmly without doing anything. Well, this was all part of Anthony's plan. The only reason he risked showing himself in front of all these beasts, who would kill him in one blow, was that for the past 2 days he observed that for some reason he never witnessed any beasts who are close to the pool attacking each other. They passively come, drink, and go away peacefully. But it was not like all the monsters are all lovey-dovey with each other. They do fight and kill each other, but not near the pool. So, Anthony concluded, there is definitely something special about this water. Now finally, in front of the pool, Anthony, all curious. Well, he didn't want to drink this suspicious water, but his curiosity got the better of him, and he decided to drink it. But as soon as he did, his tongue got half burned. It was like he drank hydrochloric acid. His stomach also started to burn from inside. Now, lying on the ground, all in pain, Anthony couldn't believe it and was in confusion as to why all these creatures were drinking this painful acid all day. But the strange part was, aside from the burning sensation, there were no changes in his body, no power-up. Nothing. Well, now that Anthony had done what he came for, he could explore elsewhere. But before leaving, he decided to take a little more sip. But again, as he did, his insides started to burn, and he decided to never drink this holy shit again. Now that his curiosity about the pool was satisfied, he decided to explore the entire cave using his tunnel sense. After activating tunnel sense, Anthony discovered various tunnels inside the cave, and he started to explore each tunnel one by one. After a while, Anthony found something exciting. Yes, stairs! Curious and excited, Anthony decided to check out the stair. As he did, he noticed these stairs were directly carved into the stone, and on top of that, there were some sorts of designs on the stairs, which means there are humans in this world. This made Anthony extremely happy, and he started to fantasize about the people of this world. He wondered if there would be dwarves and hot elves in this world. Now, the point was where these stairs would lead him, to the outside of the dungeon or to another part of the dungeon. Thinking all this, Anthony started to climb down the stairs, but then noticed something. He was easily able to climb down the stairs, unlike any small ants. That means Anthony can measure himself using these stairs. If he assumes people in this world are roughly the same size as those on Earth, then by comparing his size to the stairs, he will be able to make a rough estimation of how large he is. So, according to this theory, Anthony must be probably tall enough to come up to a full-grown adult's knee. Then, with a jolt of realization, he realized if his theory is correct, then that means all those monsters who looked so terrifying and massive to him from a human perspective would actually be fairly small. That means all the monsters in this area are actually very weak. This made Anthony terrified. If all these monsters are weak, that means outside the dungeon there will be more powerful and huge, terrifying monsters. This thought was enough to make Anthony not go down the stair. He didn't want to go straight into his death, but in his panic, he actually accidentally climbed down the stairs, and as he did, he noticed something. There were wall torches hanging on the wall. This made Anthony very excited. This means that civilization was very near. After that, Anthony continued to explore deeper into the dungeon, and the deeper he went, the blue water veins slowly started to vanish and more signs of civilization started to appear. This made Anthony's heart pound very fast. The thought of him meeting a person from another world was making him excited. Anthony started to fantasize about how he would interact with humans if he met one. Would they attack him? And what if he tried to communicate with them using sign language? While he was thinking all this, the passage started to become more narrow, and finally, after a while, Anthony was greeted by bright, warm sunlight. In front of him was the exit of the dungeon. This made Anthony very emotional and happy, but his happiness didn't last for very long. As Anthony discovered a large door and some sort of room made under the dungeon, just then, inside the door, two humans walked in. The long-haired woman was holding a red crystal. Just then, the black-haired boy started to chant something, and his hand started to glow. This made Anthony overly excited. Seeing magic is really possible in this world, but his happiness didn't last long when the red crystal in this pitch darkness suddenly, like a laser, pinpointed Anthony. That red crystal was actually a monster detector. At that moment, Anthony realized he was screwed. He was so damn happy to meet real humans that he totally forgot. He was literally a freaking 1-meter ant monster. Reality hit hard. Anthony didn't waste a single second. He turned around and with full speed, he bolted to save his life. He was terrified, scared out of his wits, and all those dreams of learning magic from the humans shattered. Anthony was so nervous that he was running at full throttle, not paying attention at all, and bam! One of his small legs tripped over a rock. His speed dropped, and at that very instant, the humans fired magical fireballs at him. Anthony was injured, unable to move properly, and those fireballs, they were closing in fast. Just in the nick of time, with everything he had, Anthony managed to dodge one of the fireballs by hiding behind the very rock he had tripped over. Taking a deep breath, Anthony used the rocks in front of him as cover and somehow managed to crawl forward, dodging those deadly fireballs. He came close to the wall, thinking he was finally safe, but oh hell no. An arrow launched by that blondie woman landed just a centimeter below Anthony's tiny PP. Anthony screamed in fear, thinking, I almost got a second hole. If Anthony was going to make it out of this alive, he needed a distraction, and he needed it fast. But first, he had to find an exit route. Anthony ran with all his might, but yet another problem stood in his way. 3 new tunnels. Seriously, Anthony thought, as he shuffled through the random tunnels, relying on his tunnel sense to judge if a path was a go or no-go. After 3 pathways, Anthony found himself in front of a tunnel with the most awful stench he'd ever encountered. The humans were right behind him. No time to think, so Anthony made the call. He decided to fight like a monster, spraying his special butt juice at each of the humans. But did it work? Not really. It didn't delay them much. If anything, it just made them angrier. Before Anthony knew it, another arrow came flying right for his face. He managed to dodge it by slamming his face down to the ground. By now, Anthony understood one thing. His whole idea of making friends with the humans and starting a monster-human alliance? Yeah, it was dead in the water. Anthony had really hoped to establish friendly relations with the humans, and maybe found his own monster nation in the jungle, but nope. Now we're back to Anthony running, still inside one of those tunnels he'd randomly picked with his tunnel sense. And of course, those fireballs? Yeah, they were still chasing him. Anthony wasn't about to give up, though. He had a new goal: become the boss of this dungeon. Become so powerful that no one, human or monster, could lay a hand on him. Then, and only then, he'd reach out to the human. But deep in his thoughts, he didn't see the sharp rock sticking out from the cave wall. He smashed his tiny head into it. Ouch! Injuring himself again. The cave hole was small, and it seemed like the humans had stopped chasing him. Anthony collapsed to the ground, his eyes swollen, mouth aching, body throbbing in pain. He was just glad he had somehow managed to survive. But then, all of the piled-up frustration exploded. Anthony, grabbing his face, began crying like a baby, cursing himself. How could I be so stupid, so dumb? What was he thinking, going anywhere near the humans? He reminded himself, he's not human anymore. He's a freaking 1-meter-long ant! After a moment, Anthony stood up. He was ready to move again. He paused, standing there for a while, trying to figure out what was next. Ahead of him? Centipede monsters. He had no chance against them right now. Behind him? The tunnel from where he'd just escaped those crazy humans. What the hell do I do now? Anthony was just debating his options when... oh no, the crazy hole digger guy peeked from behind, with that psychopathic, creepy smile staring straight at Anthony. This sent chills down Anthony's body, and he immediately started dashing forward while the man also prepared a fireball, not giving Anthony any chance to run. Well, at this point, I'm starting to think this man has something personal with ants. Now, Anthony didn't have much choice. If he went back, the pervy man was ready with his balls, and forward were the pervy centipedes who liked to smash each other. Well, Anthony was basically screwed. Just then, Anthony got a great idea. He activated his stealth mode and slowly started crawling toward the centipede monster. And yes, like always, they were having a great time riding each other. Anthony's plan was to spray his acid on the centipede beasts. And once they got aggro onto him, he would lead the angry centipedes toward the humans and make them smash each other, and at the right time, he would flee. So with that, Anthony carefully aimed his juice at the body of the centipede, startling them. Well, the acid did little to no damage to them due to their thick skin, but yes, it did piss all of them off as it ruined their fun time. All furious, the centipede started to chase Anthony, and once again, with all his might, he started to run for his life. But even after running for several minutes, it was taking too long to get to the entrance. This made Anthony cry out, "Why am I facing all these calamities? Why did I reincarnate as an ant when I was still a virgin and didn't do any bad thing in my past life?" He continued running, but he was losing strength. His legs were shaking, and his stamina wouldn't last long as the centipedes were catching up to him. One centipede almost caught up with Anthony and tried to bite his ass, but Anthony jumped high, dodging, and once again, for the last time with all his might, continued to run. Well, he didn't want to get smashed by a centipede. It would be worse than dying. Finally, Anthony started to see the exit of the cave, but he was running so fast that he didn't manage to stop on time and came flying out of the cave right in front of the pervy man. This surprised the man, and he prepared his ball. But little did the man know that behind Anthony, a group of hairy insects was coming for his ball. And voila! The centipedes came bursting out of the cave like a newborn baby, startling the man. The centipedes were still chasing Anthony, and the man was barely able to block the centipedes' pointy legs. Anthony finally landed safely on the floor and was ready to escape. But well, little did he know that behind him, all the centipedes were standing, ready to smash him. They were drooling with hungry eyes. This made Anthony feel like he would piss his pants any moment. His face turned pale. Anthony crawled down, mentally preparing himself before getting smashed. But just then, a blasting sound startled him, and as he looked back, he got shocked that his plan worked. Well, the humans were now targeting the centipede beasts. Oh, the fierce battle continued between the hunters and the centipede beasts. They were ripping into each other, and there was Anthony, still too scared to even move. He was huddled down, trying to hide himself, trying not to get caught in the crossfire between the humans and the centipedes. But this was the exact scenario Anthony had envisioned. Well, his plan worked great this time. So now, although he was hella scared with a sweaty face, he slowly started to crawl forward, trying to stay out of the way of the great battle. He was just praying that no human or centipede would spot him. But suddenly, a damn centipede noticed Anthony. It tried to attack his butt, and Anthony barely saved his ass by jumping. This made Anthony extremely annoyed. Why the hell are these damn centipedes so horny? But Anthony continued to crawl forward. However, because of the centipede, he got distracted and bumped into a human. As Anthony looked up, it was too late. The human was a spearman, and with a deadly serious look, he was ready to split Anthony into two. But Anthony's luck was just too damn great. So that centipede that tried to pierce Anthony's ass was still chasing him, and instead of hitting Anthony, the spearman split that centipede up. Once again, Anthony thanked Gandalf the system for giving him such bountiful luck. He had been spared repeatedly with perfectly timed interventions from higher power. He would love to praise the bearded wizard more, but he was still in deep trouble. His luck would not be enough to escape the two enemies trying to catch up from behind. Public enemy number 1, the human male guard, and public enemy number 2, the centipede beast. So once again, Anthony, with the last bit of energy in his body, started to run. He was determined not to die and to survive this battle. He activated his stealth mode, and now the question was where he could hide. He didn't have any more stamina to continue running, but just then, Anthony noticed a big stone hall and decided to hide behind it for the time being. After hiding behind it, Anthony started to observe the battle between the humans and the centipedes. After a very long time, Anthony could finally relax. Seeing a human getting banged up by the centipede, he felt bad. He didn't want to put his fellow monsters in front of these humans. But what could he do? If he hadn't done that, he would have died. So it was either Anthony needed to die or the centipedes. Meanwhile, in the quiet city of Lyria, the diligent Commander Titus was in his office, working late into the night. He was sitting all alone in the grand office with a pile of paperwork. The lines on his face showed how stressed and frustrated he was. The commander was deep in stress because some damned fools just couldn't leave the dungeon situation to him and his team. For some unknown reason, which hasn't been revealed yet, the commander had to lock himself up in this old room and do this shitty paperwork. But this was making him more furious, because this old man is a battle maniac who could hunt all day and night, and now he was trapped in a dark office, burning candlelight with senseless paperwork. And the more he watched his beloved mighty axe, the more agitated he got, itching to smash some monsters. He almost broke his desk in half out of frustration. Well, at this point, the old man was just too frustrated, so he decided to step out of this old office to get some fresh air. Getting out of the dimly lit office, the forward garrison troops outside stood up for the commander. Commander Titus did not acknowledge their presence. He just walked straight out of the hall. Another heavy door opened, and another batch of clean-cut troops stood at attention for their valiant leader. Everywhere he went, everyone would stop what they were doing and salute him. He was like a god in this place. The commander pushed through until he reached a simple wooden door with 2 armed guards on either side. The commander asked the mage archer woman what the situation outside was, why there was commotion of fighting monsters for so long, and she explained 15 minutes ago an ant monster attacked this guard post, but instead of attacking, he fell, and after a while, he came back with some centipede monsters. After hearing this, the commander got confused for a while and once again asked if what she was saying was the truth. The girl once again explained everything in detail, that although all the centipedes are getting killed easily, the weird thing was that ant is nowhere to be seen. Probably it fled. Then suddenly, the commander turned back and started to walk. This startled the woman. She tried to call the commander, but the commander was dead silent, extremely excited, and could not stop laughing, thinking about a monster with enough intelligence to flee danger and also to bring some allies of different kinds of monsters. Meanwhile, outside, the battle between the centipedes and hunters was still raging on, and the hunters continued to slaughter the centipede. Anthony, in his stealth mode, was just too scared to even move an inch from his position. At this point, this wasn't just a battle. It was a one-sided slaughter. The centipedes were getting mercilessly slaughtered. Then, Anthony again started to analyze the situation, thinking with his current strength there was no way he could even defeat a single human, let alone a group of them. So there wasn't any chance of getting out of this dungeon if this was the only exit. Well, this thought made Anthony extremely panic. Anthony didn't want to remain inside this damn cave his entire life and die again being a virgin. He wanted to enjoy his second life, make some friends. So Anthony metaphorically slapped himself, which snapped him out of this negative thinking. Anthony decided to think about all the new things he found in this misadventure. First, he found that in this world there is the existence of magic. Second, there are humans present in this world, and they can use magic. And lastly, the humans are extremely stronger than him. He is just a weak little ant in front of them, ready to get crushed. Anthony learned a valuable lesson about the king of stats, HP. After being blasted by stone shards and scorched by fireballs, his HP was reduced by half. Now that Anthony figured out what it feels like to take damage, the most important task at hand was to find out how he can regain his HP. His max HP was 30, which got reduced to 15. Anthony was in deep thought, wondering whether his HP would recover over time automatically, or if he would have to heal his wounds manually. But the main problem was, there were no visible wound mark or any sort of wound on Anthony's body, so he was really confused. In this confusion, Anthony noticed the humans had already finished killing all the poor centipedes and had already left the area. Seeing the centipede corpses, Anthony got a brilliant idea. He decided to devour the centipedes in the hope of regenerating his HP, and also he didn't want to leave a mountain of free biomass points. So Anthony slowly climbed down and started to devour the centipedes one by one, slowly ripping them apart, enjoying their meat. Although Anthony was pretending like a king enjoying the meat, but just like last time, the centipede meat was also horribly disgusting, which made Anthony vomit once again. But what can he do? After he finished his meal, the system notified Anthony that he had consumed a new source of biomass named Unguibus scolopendra, and now Anthony could unlock this monster's info tab. Anthony, on the other hand, although he was depressed and feeling like he will die by vomiting because of the aftertaste, he knew the biomass was the most important gain, so it was worth eating this horrible meat. After that, Anthony opened the system window of the centipede beast, and a hologram of the beast appeared in front of him. The system informed Anthony that the name of the monster was Claw Centipede, and it has very strong claws and venomous spikes in its tail. But, like the last time, the other info was blurred out. Although this info wasn't detailed, because Anthony might need to devour more centipedes to unlock more details, the fact that the centipede had poisonous spikes was new to Anthony, and this was life-saving info. Without this info, Anthony could have died if he fought with the centipedes in the future, and he didn't have any poison resistance or poison healing ability. Then the system notified him that he also gained 1 biomass point. This made Anthony once again excited, and he opened his stats window. After opening his status window, he got surprised noticing his HP increased to 17 from 15. This made him more confused, thinking was his HP increased because he ate the centipede meat, or was it supposed to increase automatically? But for the time being, Anthony put that thought aside because he had more important things to do. He had 2 biomass points available to spend. Well, Anthony was still very confused about his HP. That's a different thing. Anthony's HP was slowly increasing. But this was the problem, because Anthony wasn't understanding whether his HP was increasing due to eating those centipedes, or if his HP was already going to increase over time. Deciding to put this thought aside, Anthony smirked to himself, feeling confident that he would deal with the HP issue later. He figured that if his HP didn't increase after waiting half an hour, then the centipedes were responsible for the boost. If, however, his HP increased naturally after a while, he'd know it was just regenerating with time. With that, Anthony put his HP concerns to rest and shifted his focus to the 2 biomass points he had earned. Where should he spend them? After a lot of deep thought, Anthony concluded that upgrading his acid gland and antennas would be the best choice. The system asked for his confirmation, and Anthony approved. Without much hesitation, the upgrades began. Anthony was about to mutter something about how he hoped it wouldn't hurt as much as last time, but before the words even left his mouth, the pain came, worse than before. His head felt like it was going to explode. Collapsing onto the floor, Anthony gripped his head in agony, rolling around and screaming uncontrollably. The pain was so intense he thought his head might burst. Meanwhile, outside the dungeon, Titus was growing increasingly impatient as he banged loudly on someone's door. His hand pounded against the door, calling for Alberton. Titus was clearly annoyed, wondering if Alberton had gone deaf or just couldn't hear him. After several minutes of banging with no response, Titus lost his temper. He threatened Alberton, warning him that if he didn't open the door soon, Titus would burn his stupid tower down to a crisp. As the scene panned out, Titus stood in front of a massive, towering structure. From the state of the entrance, it looked like not many people visited this place often, with spider webs covering the area. Seeing their master so angry, Titus's students, Blondie and Blackie, exchanged uneasy glances. Neither of them spoke, wondering what had caused their master to suddenly get so worked up. Finally, the door creaked open, revealing a man with messy yellow hair and dark circles under his eyes, looking like he'd just rolled out of bed. This was Alberton. The moment Alberton saw Titus, he practically exploded with rage, screaming at him in fury. He was furious that Titus had dared to threaten to burn his library, a place with 10,000 years of history. But Titus didn't flinch. Without saying a word, he stepped into the library, followed closely by his students. Alberton stood there, fuming with his chest puffed out. Had they not been childhood friends, he would have kicked Titus out right then and there. Titus, however, seemed unbothered as he casually remarked about the dust in the tower, asking if Alberton even bothered to clean the place. Alberton's face grew redder with each word. A bit of back and forth passed between them before Titus introduced his students, finally revealing their real names, Mira and Don. Alberton, still holding his head in frustration, grumbled about this not being a daycare. He questioned why Titus had brought trainees here instead of letting them train in the dungeon. Remaining calm, Titus explained that they had seen a beast in the dungeon and had come to the library to identify it. Alberton, unimpressed, sighed with disappointment, accusing Titus of becoming careless and neglecting to teach his students the basics of dungeon monsters. He pointed out that the king had banned dungeon exploration for a few days, meaning all trainees were stuck on guard duty on the first floor. He couldn't believe that Titus hadn't even mentioned basic monsters like thorns, lizards, and centipedes to his students. Titus, though clearly irritated, kept his kind smile plastered on his face. He subtly suggested that if Alberton thought Titus was so neglectful, perhaps Alberton himself should teach his students. He then explained that the reason they had come to the library today was to identify an ant. Alberton was momentarily baffled, but Titus had already turned and started making his way into the library, offering no further explanation. Titus scanned the shelves, pulling out a few books about ants and handing them to his students. Mira, holding the books, couldn't help but ask why their master was getting so worked up over an ant. It seemed ridiculous. Ants were weak, pathetic creatures that any beginner hunter could easily crush. Chuckling at her words, Titus explained to his students that while a single ant may be weak and pathetic, you would never face just one. Ants never worked alone. They swarmed in groups, hundreds, sometimes even thousands strong. If you saw one ant near the dungeon, it meant the rest weren't far behind. If they continued to breed and grow in number, they could easily become a swarm of thousands. And if that happened, and they swarmed out of the dungeon, it would spell disaster. Everyone knew what happened at Jeju Island. Titus was absolutely right. He was damn right. Now, back to Antony. He's lying on the ground, upside down on his back. And just now, Antony's waking up after taking a good nap. He thinks to himself, yesterday was way too hectic. But then, Antony suddenly jolts awake and starts praying to Gandalf. "Oh, Gandalf, guide me," he says, eyes squeezed shut in earnest. After that, Antony starts imagining himself as some kind of intelligent professor, thinking seriously about his future plans. He's got two important tasks that need to be done. Saying this, Antony starts chomping down on a dead centipede in front of him. And again, we see how Antony actually looks, from the perspective of a centipede. Antony might imagine himself as a cute little ant, but in reality, he looks like a dangerous, monstrous beast. Antony grabs the centipede by its face and starts thinking while eating it. He has to do something to upgrade his eyes to level 3 so he can see better. For that, he's gonna need biomass. Plus, to make sure he doesn't get slaughtered on his way, he also needs to move closer to his nest. Antony eats the centipede and gains a new biomass point. His only objective now is to get back to his nest, the same nest he made a while ago. But then Antony notices something. A lot of hunters have come into the dungeon, and they're fighting those creepy centipedes. They're slaughtering them. Antony sighs, saying to himself, "Welp, there goes my perfect day ruined again." He'd thought today would be a relief day, but nope, it's not looking that way. So Antony turns back, starting to crawl on the wall, activating his stealth mode. Antony gets a little serious now. Why on earth are all these soldiers even here? He thinks. Since the time he opened his eyes, humans haven't entered the dungeon like this, all aggressive. So why now? Antony keeps crawling, getting a little further. He finally reaches the place where the mysterious blue water is. And sure enough, the hunters are there, too. They're killing centipedes and making them flee. Not only that, but 3 to 4 hunters have also surrounded the mysterious water. They've hung a bunch of crystals over it, red crystals tied on chains hanging in the water. Seeing all this, Antony becomes instantly fascinated. His eyes start sparkling. He can't believe this world has such fancy technology and these funky-looking crystals. He wonders if these humans are somehow gathering energy from the mysterious water. But Antony quickly shakes that thought off. "Now's not the time to be fascinated by magic," he tells himself. "If a human senses me, I'm done for." Antony starts crying a little, realizing he's trapped from both sides. The main problem now is, how's he supposed to get out alive? It'd be really stupid to try and escape through all the magical red crystals, especially since all the hunters are gathered there. The red crystals can sense monsters, so it'd be suicidal to try and go over them. Antony can't go back either. Where he had made his nest? Yeah, the hunters have captured it, they're guarding it. So neither going back nor forward is an option for Antony now. Antony's got only one option left, but he's not exactly thrilled about it. He starts imagining himself dead, lying in a coffin with a beautiful pink flower on top. He thinks, if I take the only path I have, death is pretty much guaranteed. That path leads to the huge, bloodthirsty crocodile beast. Antony remembers that huge green crocodile, how it was eating his companions. Well, Antony thinks, if it's between dying at the hands of the hunters or facing the crocodile beast, might as well take my chances with the croc. Maybe, just maybe, he'll think of some other idea on the way. After that, Antony looks at his nest one last time. He gets a little emotional and says his goodbye, tears welling up. I've had a lot of happy moments in this place, but now it's time to leave. Then Antony thinks, if only he had his fellow ant bros with him, then this could have been a real home. If Antony had made a house with other ants, he could have played with them. Just think of the fun they could have had. Then, an idea struck him, an absolutely brilliant one. Antony realized he wasn't alone in this cave. Surely there had to be many more ants around. Ants just like him. The thought filled him with determination. This was the perfect time to find his birth nest. He was alone, in danger, and being among many ants would mean no one could harm him. It was high time to find his own kind, Antony thought, his determination growing stronger. But there was a challenge. If Antony wanted to get to his nest, he had to either defeat the crocodile beast or escape from it. He suspected that the croc beast may have stolen a bunch of ant eggs from the nest, and perhaps Antony himself had come from those stolen eggs. When he opened his eyes, there were no other ants around, and where he hatched, there was no nest in sight. To Antony, it seemed that the croc beast was guarding his real nest. Antony realized that he had one crucial advantage: his tunnel sense. If he could get close to the crocodile beast, then maybe, just maybe, he could use his tunnel sense to hide and slip back to his nest. Thinking of this, a smile spread across his face. He had to stay positive. He would head towards his ant nest. Antony had just one objective now: find his queen ant, his mommy ant. He imagined the reunion, hugging his mommy ant, and that thought filled him with even more determination. Motivated like never before, Antony started crawling forward. As he moved, he noticed something strange. Those blue veins, the same ones he saw after drinking that mysterious water, were getting brighter, and they were vibrating too. He kept following those glowing lines, praying no dangerous monsters would show up. Finally, the tunnel ended. With no monster in sight, Antony took a deep breath and instantly activated his tunnel sense. Determined, he thought, it was time to get away from those disgusting humans. Suddenly, Antony's antenna picked up something. A signal. He was sensing something. Following that signal, Antony moved ahead and could feel that about 100 meters away, there was a change in the air. Antony kept moving, and soon he reached 2 caves ahead. 2 paths lay before him, one on the right and one on the left. He wondered which one to take. He tried using his tunnel sense, but the cave was too deep, and his tunnel sense just wasn't working properly here. He had no choice but to think fast. He decided to use the biomass from the centipedes he had eaten to upgrade his antennas. He needed 2 biomass points for the upgrade. The moment Antony upgraded his antennas, his head burst into pain. It was like his entire head was splitting in 2. He fell to the ground, rolling, his antennas rubbing against the rough stone floor in agony. He endured that hellish pain for what felt like half an hour, and finally, his antennas upgraded. Antony cursed Gandalf in his mind. Why did he have to make a small ant like Antony suffer so much? Why did he have to endure such pain just for an upgrade? After enduring it all, Antony finally used his newly upgraded antennas. Immediately, a disgusting black rotten smell hit him, almost making him feel like he was about to die. But the other tunnel had no such smell. The choice was easy. Antony chose the left tunnel. He figured that if he chose the tunnel on the right, he'd be walking straight into a horrible death. With that, Antony picked the left tunnel and moved ahead, whispering to himself, "Slow and steady always wins the race." Suddenly, as he ventured further into the left tunnel, he began picking up pheromones. Now, if you don't know, ants release a special smell from their pheromone gland, a scent trail that other ants can detect and follow. Anthony realized this meant that there were many ants ahead. Seeing this, he felt overjoyed. He could almost feel himself wanting to yell, "Yes!" He imagined himself dancing with his fellow ants as he made his way forward, hopeful. But as we zoomed out, a sinister presence made itself known. Huge spider webs were woven across the top of the cave, and from those dark webs, green, dangerous, mysterious eyes were watching. After that, we see Anthony standing outside the cave entrance, fully determined, with a confident look on his face. He's ready. "My colony is calling me," he says, filled with pride. But then, almost immediately, Anthony's confidence dips, his face drops, and he mumbles to himself, "Let's not get carried away now." Last time he felt this confident, things didn't go well at all. And the main point, Anthony hasn't even returned to max HP yet. He hasn't fully recovered. He knows he's got to be careful, really careful. So cautious and alert, Anthony starts crawling down the unknown path ahead. Well, thanks to his newly upgraded antennas, Anthony is able to sense the tunnel more deeply. But as he moves ahead, the tunnel itself becomes more and more irregular. It's zigging and zagging all throughout the earth. This tunnel is so confusing that if a human came inside, he probably wouldn't be able to find his way out. Another strange thing, Anthony notices a strong vibration in the air, but it's not regular, it's more like a pulse. And there's only one thing that could mean something very dangerous is up ahead. Suddenly, 4 or 5 tunnels branch out in front of him, and Anthony mutters to himself that these tunnels are forming a super messy network, making it hard to keep track of. Fortunately, with his tunnel sense now upgraded to level 2, Anthony has a new skill that allows him to maintain his sense of direction. He can visualize the tunnels like a map in his mind. Wherever he goes, he can mark it like a map. He won't forget the paths he's traveled. But still, Anthony doesn't depend only on his skills. As he continues ahead, he makes symbols on the walls that he can see and remember to mark which way is which. Just in case his skill fails for some reason, Anthony wants to be able to find out where he has gone. Out of those 5 paths, Anthony chooses the first one. Slowly, Anthony gets on high alert as soon as he enters the tunnel. His eyes go wide open. Right there, a red eye, an intense, furious red eye is staring back at him. Attached to it, a wolf-like body, white fur, a crocodile's tail, with spikes all over it. And that beast? It's just eating, chewing some poor monster raw. There were only bones left, and more of these beasts were gnawing on the bones. Anthony instantly felt the overwhelming danger. He turned on his heel and ran out of that tunnel as fast as he could. He knew these 5 paths were dangerous, but he had to check each one out and find the one that was least dangerous. The first tunnel failed miserably. Anthony marked a big cross in front of it so he wouldn't enter it by mistake again. That cross? It meant instant death. Afterward, Anthony took a moment to sense all the other tunnels, trying to figure out which one was the least dangerous. Every single tunnel screamed danger, but one of them seemed slightly better. Anthony decided that was the one. Slowly, he entered, a bit nervous, hoping this path would be more manageable. 5 minutes passed, and Anthony felt happy. No monsters around, nothing chasing him, nothing glaring at him. He thought to himself, this tunnel seems safe, almost pleasant. But then, suddenly, something felt wrong. He couldn't sense anything, but he had an uneasy feeling. And then with his upgraded eyesight, Anthony noticed a strange, white, thin string. Anthony remembered just one thing. Yes, a spider. He moved slowly closer to that white string, carefully observing it, and finally confirmed it. It was 110% a spider web. Anthony realized that without his level 2 eyesight, there was no way he would have noticed this nearly invisible web from a distance. Slowly, Anthony looked around, and that's when he saw it. It wasn't just one web. There were many of them, white, transparent spider webs all around. If Anthony hadn't stopped to look carefully, he would have stepped right onto one of those webs. And then? Only Gandalf knows what would have happened to me, Anthony thought. He probably wouldn't have survived. Thinking about this, Anthony got pissed off. He mentally shouted at that spider. "Stupid spider! What do you think of yourself, huh? You think you're the king of insects or something?" Up till now, all the monsters Anthony faced weren't insects. They were other creatures. But seeing that Anthony was also an insect and now facing a spider, it was different. Anthony started feeling some type of competitive vibe. He wanted to prove he wasn't inferior to other insects. He wanted to show that he could defeat the spider. But looking at these spiders, Anthony was getting pissed. Seriously? All the spider had to do was set up its web in the cave and bam! Any insect or beast that even stepped foot in that web would get stuck. It'd get paralyzed, no way to move, and once they were good and numb, the spider would just crawl over, poison them, and have a nice meal. The spider doesn't even have to do any hard work, Anthony thought, grinding his mandible. If only I had reincarnated as a spider. But he knew there was no point whining about it now. Anthony also remembered something else. Ants don't work alone. They're a team. If Anthony had just 200 more ants with him, he'd show that spider who's the real king of insects. But no use thinking about what-ifs. Anthony made a vow. Someday I'll make my colony so big, it'll be the boss of this whole dungeon. And after that, he'd sleep peacefully, show a little laziness, but to get there, he had to become the boss of this dungeon first. Slowly and carefully, Anthony dodged all the spider webs, making his way forward. It was so dark in the cave that he couldn't see the spider. But just because he couldn't see it didn't mean the spider wasn't close by. First things first, Anthony thought. He needed to gather information. He needed to figure out the best path forward. Carefully, Anthony dodged all those webs, picking up a few stones with his mandibles. He was planning something. He threw a stone at one of the webs and then threw all the rest of the stones in different directions. Anthony needed to make the spider think there was something trapped in its web. Get the spider to come out. Anthony instantly hid, activating his stealth mode, and voila, slowly out came a black shadow. A huge spider was moving ahead, investigating the noises. Anthony could see it even though it was far. All he could really make out was its shadow, but even that sent chills down his tiny ant body. Anthony felt creeped out. What the hell is that hideous, creepy look, he thought. 8 furry legs, barely able to hold up its big, fat body. And then, comparing himself to that spider, Anthony only had 3 body segments and 6 legs. Man, you all know how much I hate spiders. If a spider this size came into my house, I'd be out of there. The spider could have the whole place. I wouldn't care. And to anyone else watching, what about you guys? Which insect are you scared of? Anyway, back to the situation at hand. Anthony looked at that huge spider and thought to himself, this spider is also low on the food chain, just like me. Its size was pretty similar to Anthony's too, meaning it was probably not a high-level monster. Slowly, Anthony started to get annoyed. If only my many-legged friend could just sit still, he thought. I could actually judge the distance and size. But that spider was moving so much on its web that Anthony just couldn't figure out exactly how far away it was. Then a brilliant idea hit Anthony. Since that spider was so close, why not just make his move? Anthony instantly poured all of his acid juice at the spider. The acid hit one of its legs, and Anthony didn't wait. He started running. Even with my upgraded eyesight, I'm still no match for a spider, Anthony explained. But I do have an advantage. My stealth mode. He could hide, and that was exactly what he was doing. What does that spider think? Anthony thought. If I sit still in the shadows, I'm safe. Ha, I can still see it. Anthony activated his stealth mode and came back to a safe distance, from where the spider couldn't do anything to him. But that didn't mean Anthony was done. He poured his acid juice again, hitting the spider directly this time. The acid splattered all over the spider's body. Instantly, clouds of acid gas started coming off of it. The spider began to growl, loudly in a creepy, unsettling way. Seeing this, Anthony couldn't help but taunt that spider. He turned around and began running out of the cave. "Come on, dumb spider!" he shouted. "If you've got the guts, if you've got big pee-pee, then follow me!" And with that, Anthony dashed out of the cave, not looking back. After that, we see Anthony just pretending to be confident and strong in front of the spider. But despite all his big talk, on the inside, Anthony is shaking like a leaf. He's feeling like any moment now he's gonna pee his pants. His whole body is trembling, he's covered in sweat. But with every ounce of willpower, Anthony keeps running from that cave. He keeps running until he finds himself back at those same caves from earlier. Anthony's plan was simple. If the spider chased him out, he'd lead it straight back to these caves. Then Anthony would dart inside, and when the spider and that wolf-lizard beast came face to face, he'd slip away, using his stealth mode to vanish. The lizard wolf would see the spider and attack, and the spider would retaliate. Anthony would just sit back and watch it all unfold from a nice, safe distance. His idea was that either the spider would kill all 3 wolf lizards, or again the lizards would take down the spider. Either way, Anthony's path would be clear. And if the spider did manage to win, it would be so weak afterward that Antony could easily finish it off. Either way, a win-win situation. But Antony's plan didn't work. He felt his confidence crumble, and his breathing stopped in frustration. The spider, it turned out, was smarter than he thought. Cunning, even. Instead of leaving its web to chase after Antony, the spider just stayed put, keeping to its web. It was being cautious, playing it safe, and that made Antony even angrier. He was fuming because, in his eyes, that spider was living the good life. It just sat there comfortably, in its web, waiting for prey to come wandering into its trap, served to it on a silver platter. Antony imagined himself as a spider. Man, if I were a spider, I'd just chill all day in my web, waiting for prey to be served to me. The idea of waiting and then slowly devouring whatever got caught in the trap with a wicked smile? It was too good to be true. Being a spider, Antony thought, was like playing life in easy mode, but there was no use whining about what could have been. Antony took a deep breath, trying to keep himself calm, but it didn't work. His rage kept building and building, his anger reaching sky-high levels. If I want to cool off, I've got to do something, Antony thought. I have to kill that spider. It's the only way I'll get any peace. There was no way he was going to let that spider live such an easy life. With that thought, Antony rethought every possibility and came up with a new plan. And this time, according to his calculations, there was a very strong possibility he could win. First, he noticed that the tunnel was unusually bright. This meant that if the spider did leave its web to chase him, spotting it would be easy. Secondly, from what Antony could tell, the spider was about as weak as he was, at least stat-wise. So if he could just lure it out of its web, he could take it on in a one-on-one fight. If I can get it out here, Antony thought, I can take it down. But then came the main question. How the hell could he get the spider to leave its web and make sure that they never fought on the spider's turf? Phase 1 was already complete. He had hit it with 2 acid attacks earlier, and that must have drained its health. Each acid shot took 5 GP from his opponent, and Antony had 30 GP himself. That meant the spider's health was already down by 20%. If Antony managed to land 4 more shots, the spider would be done for. All Antony had to do now was ambush it, over and over again. Use stealth, hide, shoot some acid at the spider, then run like hell. If the spider chased him out, then he'd lead it straight to the wolf lizards. And if the spider chose to stay in its web, well, Antony would just keep taking shots at it until it was no more. It's a tedious, lengthy way, Antony thought, but it's the safest way. Antony made sure his eyesight was at level 2, and he put his antennas into full alert mode. He started looking for the spider, staying on guard. But something strange happened. Even after searching for a long time, Antony couldn't find the spider anywhere. There was no sign of it. Where the hell did it go? Antony wondered. It wasn't even on its web anymore. After that, Antony went on a mission. He collected a bunch of small stones, planning to draw that spider out. One by one, he threw the stones around the spider's web, hoping that maybe, just maybe, the spider would think some juicy prey had gotten tangled up. We could see the small stones shake the spider's web, each one landing with a slight thud. Antony kept at it, throwing those stones in every direction. He sat there, quiet as could be, hiding behind the spider's position. He waited and waited, hoping that spider would come crawling out. And when he was ready, Antony was gonna throw his acid juice right at it. But even after waiting for what felt like an eternity, there was no movement from the spider. It didn't come out, not even a little twitch. Seeing this, Antony was beyond pissed off. The small stones didn't work like he expected. He had figured that if those small stones landed in the web, the spider would assume a tiny insect had gotten itself stuck. But nope, that spider wasn't budging. So Antony thought, all right then, let's do this the hard way. He picked up a bigger stone and chucked it right at the spider's web. This should make it think something bigger got caught, he thought, but still, nothing. Damn it, Antony thought. Plan B isn't working either. It was time to move on to Plan C. He could see the web was shaking, but still, the spider didn't come out. So, Antony grabbed an even bigger stone and launched it at the web. The impact was hard, so hard that a portion of the web broke. And that was exactly what Antony needed. He could now move past that part of the web without directly touching it. Antony didn't want to risk touching the web. It could be paralytic or poisonous for all he knew. Plus, that web looked super sticky. If he touched it, he might get stuck, and that would be game over. The spider would crawl right over and snack on him. So instead, Antony used those big stones to break the web and managed to get ahead. He was in full concentration mode now, dodging the remaining webs as he made his way through the cave. He was actually making good progress, moving ahead without much trouble. But then, as he moved a little further, he sensed it, a huge spider web. Antony immediately knew what he had to do. He activated his acid shot, and boom, all of his green juice splattered right onto the web. When he saw the acid hit its target, Antony got a surge of happiness. He quickly turned around and started running. He made a big jump to clear more distance. He'd already broken enough of the spider's web, so with a single leap, he managed to make it back to the entrance of the cave. But then, just as he thought he was in the clear, mistake time, one of the spider's webs got stuck to his foot. The web was so sticky that no matter how much he struggled, his foot just wouldn't come free. Antony stumbled, and down he went, hitting the ground hard. He started to panic, tears welling up in his eyes. "Is this it?" he thought. "Is my adventure gonna end right here? The spider's gonna come, and that's it. Game over!" But then Antony noticed something strange. The spider wasn't moving. It wasn't crawling out to get him. He turned back and managed to free his foot from the sticky web. After a while, he spotted the spider. It was lying upside down on the ground, and a lot of smoke was coming out of its stomach. Antony took a second to process it. Was the spider dead or just unconscious? He realized that maybe, just maybe, he had underestimated how effective his acid shots were. Maybe the spider's HP level was much lower than his, and with just 3 acid shots, it looked like the spider was done for. Antony shook his head, feeling a pang of regret. "Sorry, spider," he thought. "Maybe I misjudged your power. Turns out you were weaker than I thought." And just like that, the fight was over. After that, the scene shifts and we see Antony taking a bite out of the spider. And right as he takes that bite, ding! The system notifies him Antony has consumed a new source of biomass, pure arnia. Apparently, arnia was the gene of a spider, its unique characteristic. Along with that, Antony also gained 1 biomass point and unlocked the basic profile of the spider. When Antony opens up the system, he realizes the truth. It was a baby spider, a level 1. Antony just stands there, staring at the spider, thinking, that was just a level 1 baby monster spider. It's possible this poor thing had never managed to consume any biomass at all, never even had a chance to upgrade. It was just born and was quietly sitting on its web waiting for its first prey to come along so it could upgrade itself. And then Antony showed up, killed it, and ate it. Antony felt the rage he directed at that spider was so misplaced. Just 2 acid blasts, and the spider was pretty much done for, no chance to recover. The poor thing shrunk to nothing. A wave of guilt hits Antony. He feels sorry for this young baby spider. But then, Antony thinks, I'm a monster now, aren't I? This is how it's gotta be. If Antony hadn't killed the spider, then the spider would have killed him, would have upgraded, and survived. If Antony wanted to make it in this dungeon, he had to stop feeling bad about all of this. With that in mind, Antony picks up a bunch of stones and starts breaking all the remaining spider webs in his way, moving forward step by step. Considering that was just a level 1 baby, Antony mutters, I probably didn't gain much experience, but at least I got 2 biomass points from eating it. And with that, Antony's getting closer to upgrading his eyesight to level 3, not long now. He had wanted to upgrade his eyesight earlier, but he chose to upgrade his antennas instead, so he could navigate better. Now, Antony is all about collecting biomass to get that eyesight upgrade. This dungeon was basically a series of dark caves, and if Antony's eyes became spider-sharp, he'd be able to see through the darkness, to face real dangers and survive dangerous situations. Once Antony upgraded his eyes, he'd be ready to work on other parts of his body, to become stronger, more powerful. Maybe then he could take someone on in a real fight. No more hiding, no more sneaking, Antony thought. I'll be able to fight head-on. Slowly, Antony kept moving through the cave. He was thinking aloud, I gotta figure out how to grow into an adult ant. Would leveling up make him evolve into an adult? He wondered if that was even how it worked. But one thing was for sure. To level up, Antony needed to hunt. With his stealth mode activated, Antony crept forward, realizing he needed to find a safe place to hunt if he genuinely wanted to level up. Suddenly, Antony noticed something, a huge hole right beneath him. He stared at the dark, gaping hole for a while, then picked up a big bone and tossed it down. The bone fell for a long time, but no sound came back. Antony stared down into that abyss, thinking, deeper means more dangerous, he guessed. And if that was the case, maybe he should just leave this hole alone for now. Anthony didn't want to go too deep into the dungeon, not until he was ready. But another thought crossed his mind. What if I move forward and run into that same person again? The very idea made his head ache even more. What do I do? Anthony thought, feeling lost. After a moment, he came to a decision. First things first, scout the entire area. He'd figure things out from there. If he saw any humans, he'd run, and if things got too tight, well, he'd head right back to this hole and jump in. With that plan in mind, Anthony pressed on, hoping that he'd make it out of this alive. Anthony wanted to explore this entire floor, every inch of it. He wanted to make a mind map so he wouldn't get lost again. With that goal in mind, Anthony moved a little further and, surprise, a shock was waiting for him. 2, 3 more caves had appeared right in front of him. Anthony activated his tunnel sense, and immediately something felt off. This tunnel, it looked too familiar. The exit of this tunnel led right back to where he had started all of this. Seeing this, Anthony felt a wave of confusion and disbelief. Wait, hold up, he thought. Did I just do a loop? Was this cave linked back to the first one he'd come from? As Anthony took it all in, he realized that this cave was one of the 5 caves he had seen just a while ago. Am I just going in circles? That realization hit him. He was roaming in a loop, which meant that huge hole he had seen earlier? Yeah, that was probably the right way, but Anthony still wasn't convinced. He wasn't ready to dive into that abyss yet. Let's explore these 5 tunnels properly first, he decided. So Anthony moved on, pushing forward. And while he was at it, he discovered 2 new monsters lurking in one of the caves. Anthony immediately activated his stealth mode, slowly sneaking ahead, carefully avoiding those creatures. He needed to find a good place to hide, fast. Anthony started digging, clawing at the cave's floor and using his big teeth. He managed to make a small hole, crawled inside and quickly filled the entrance back up. Safe for now. From his tiny hiding spot, Anthony started observing the 2 new creatures. Suddenly, ding! The system gave him a notification. Digging skill upgraded to level 4. Anthony's eyes went wide. He was a little surprised, but more than that, he felt proud. All right, Anthony thought. Even if digging is kind of useless, it's still good to know I'm getting better at it. He thought back to how weak he was when he was at level 1. But now, in just a short time, Anthony had improved a lot. He wasn't the same pathetic little ant anymore. Anthony opened up his status window to take a look at all his skills. Damn, he muttered to himself. I've unlocked quite a few new skills and even upgraded some old ones. But then the reality hit him. He was still pathetically weak in combat. His mana, still 0. Toughness, 12. Cunning, 25. Will, 18. No real combat skills to speak of. He had just managed to get to level 2. His eyesight was at level 2, biomass level 2, digging was now level 4, acid shot level 2, grip level 3, bite level 3, stealth level 4, and tunnel sense still hanging down at level 1. Feeling a bit exhausted, Anthony decided to take a break. He lied down in his newly dug nest. If I want to explore this new terrain properly, I gotta get some rest. Anthony needed to stay sharp. He tried to remember his past life. You know, since I used to raise insects, especially ants back then, Anthony thought. I know one thing for sure. Ants don't really sleep, they just stay still, go into torpor. So Anthony decided he'd just close his eyes for a bit. Well, not literally. He didn't even have eyelids to close. But still, he'd rest, regain his strength, and get ready for whatever came next. After 2 hours of deep sleep, Anthony wakes up feeling refreshed and ready. With a clear mind, he crawls back out, ready to hit those tunnels again. He's got work to do. While making his way through the cave, Anthony mutters to himself, gotta get me some more biomass to level up this eyesight once and for all. He wasn't just gonna stop there either. Nah, Anthony thought. He wanted to upgrade everything. More powerful legs, a thicker, more sturdy body, a stronger shell, and a more powerful acid gland. Once he got all that done, hunting would be way easier. No more hiding around every corner. And more importantly, he needed that XP. With more levels, he could boost his stats and eventually maybe even become an adult ant. His stealth was already at level 3. If I keep at it, Anthony figured, maybe I can get it even higher by shadowing some monsters. But then Anthony reached the end of the tunnel and wham! His whole world got flipped. The tunnel he was in, it was looking way too familiar, like deja vu on steroids. It was the same path extending from the cave he had come from earlier. What in the... Anthony thought. He grabbed his head, sat down for a second, and pieced it all together. He was just circling this floor. He had felt that something was off, that the paths were all connected, and now it was confirmed. I'm in a loop, Anthony sighed, frustrated. Back at square one, he'd ended up right where he started. Dang it, Anthony muttered. Anthony decided to make a mind map. He realized that the whole floor was a maze of larger main tunnels, connected by smaller, twisting paths, kind of like a main highway with back alleys crisscrossing it. He had to get all this mapped out in his head if he was going to make sense of it. And so, frustrated as ever, Anthony made up his mind. He was going to explore every single small cave on this floor and map them all out. Maybe, just maybe, he'd find what he was looking for along the way. While Anthony was carefully moving through the tunnels, bam! A notification popped up. The system notified him that his tunnel sense was upgraded to level 3 without even using any biomass. Anthony was stunned. Wait, what? He thought. Just by mapping it in my head, my tunnel sense leveled up? It was a weird feeling knowing the system could monitor his thoughts like that. All right, Anthony said to himself. Then he remembered. He'd seen 2 new types of monsters in the area earlier. One was this dude, a large 3-tailed rat with each tail tipped with a nasty snake-like spike. The second was a slimy creature, long with a bright organic spine, looking kinda gross. Anthony could bet good biomass this slimy dude was poisonous, and it was at least twice his size. Plus, it could crawl up walls. He had to avoid its trail, no doubt about it. Didn't want to get tangled with that. Suddenly, Anthony heard a noise, some people fighting. He immediately became alert, using his upgraded tunnel sense to focus on the sounds. He followed that voice, moving ahead with dashing, lightning speed. He thought to himself, this world is like some weird game system and he need answers. For example, how did the system even award experience points when a monster died? Did it divide the XP between everyone who attacked? Like, if 5 people went after a centipede, did each one get XP based on how much damage they did? Or did it all go to the person who landed the final blow? Anthony had never gotten an experience announcement during a fight, only after the prey was dead. When Anthony hit something and delivered the final blow, that was when he gained XP. He gave a little smile. Guess I'll prove that theory right now. Anthony found himself perched above a cave, looking down below where 3 centipede monsters were fighting against a crocodile beast. He grumbled to himself, "Ugh, those pervy stupid centipedes! They think they're all that!" It was the same centipede from earlier, the one that didn't let Anthony settle in peace. That centipede had nearly killed him, but now, it and the croc were fighting each other. Anthony couldn't help but feel a bit of satisfaction. His 2 main enemies were beating the crap out of each other, and Anthony had the perfect view to watch it all unfold. He watched as the crocodile monster sat right on the centipede's face, while that centipede, with its pointy claws, was trying to dig into the croc's ass. The centipede then bit down hard, making the croc roar in anger. The crocodile grabbed the centipede with its sharp claws and just threw it away. Anthony looked on, a grin forming on his face. "You 2 idiots fight it out," he whispered to himself, "and when the time's right, I'll be the one to take advantage." The crocodile monster leapt forward, going for the centipede, ready to attack. The centipede, in a panic, tried to bite the other centipede, its mouth wide open, fangs out. Anthony watched carefully. "This is it. This is the right time," he whispered. He had been waiting for this perfect moment, and he wasn't about to miss it. With precision, Anthony launched his acid juice, hitting from such an angle that the acid splattered all over the centipede and the crocodile monster's back. Before the crocodile monster could react or even think to dodge, the centipede was coated in the green, sizzling acid. The crocodile, in its rage, bit down on the centipede, unaware that it was also chomping into that nasty acid splash. "There you go, buddy," Anthony muttered to himself. The croc, in its blind fury, had taken in a good dose of the acid juice. It was struggling now, feeling the burn inside as it crunched down on the centipede. And then, the croc's eyes caught sight of Anthony, standing there behind him. It gave Anthony the most deadly glare. But Anthony wasn't one to back off, not now. He held his ground even as the croc kept staring, its eyes full of rage. "Come on, what you got?" Anthony thought, keeping his nerve. The monster's anger was so intense that it completely forgot about the other threats. And that's when Anthony saw his opportunity. The crocodile monster was completely distracted by him and the other 2 centipedes. Oh, they took advantage. They rushed forward, getting right up in the croc's face. The centipede that had been in the croc's mouth, it slithered its way onto the croc's neck, wrapping itself around tightly. The crocodile monster, snapping back to reality, tried to shake the centipede off, pressing and twisting its neck in a mad struggle. But this beast wasn't weak. It was strong. With a single swipe, it flung all the centipedes away from its body. A mighty blow with its massive tail sent the centipede flying backward, crashing into the cave floor. But something was off. The crocodile monster. It was moving. Slower. Way slower. And then Anthony noticed it. The green-colored acid smoke emitting from the croc's body. "Oh, it's the poison kicking in," Anthony whispered to himself with a smirk. The croc had lost it, and now it was slowly getting affected by the poison. Its movements were sluggish, uncoordinated. Not only that, but it seemed to be losing its visibility, a sort of weakness coming over it. Meanwhile, the centipede that had been flung was now starting to get back on its feet, slowly coming to its senses. And that's when Anthony's wicked smile appeared, a creepy, twisted grin. He had them right where he wanted. With the perfect timing, he fired off his acid shot again. This time, the acid splashed directly onto the third centipede, the one that had already been weakened in the fight against the croc. Perfect, Anthony thought to himself. His plan was falling into place just as he had imagined. When two enemies are smashing each other to bits, Anthony grinned, you come from behind and smash them both. That was his motto. That was the way Anthony played this game. He didn't need to be stronger, he just needed to be smarter. And honestly, Anthony was just here for one thing. Let's do a little threesome, he chuckled under his breath as he watched the chaos unfold. After that, Anthony explains to us, man, normally I'd never have thought of doing something this bizarre. I mean, splashing an acid attack on a bunch of centipedes? Sounds crazy. But here he was, in the thick of it, and honestly, the centipede's hunt was almost successful. They were so close to taking down the croco beast. Anthony knew it. The centipedes ain't gonna bother coming near a tiny ant like him when they work so hard to kill the croco beast. As the centipedes had their eyes locked on the croco beast, the poor beast's breathing was getting weaker. The centipedes were closing in. Anthony explains that these centipedes ain't dumb. They had noticed the croco beast was getting weaker, so they were just dodging its attacks, patiently waiting. They knew Anthony's acid would do its job sooner or later, and as the croco beast got weaker and weaker, those centipedes were getting ready, really ready, to go in for the kill. Finally, even the croco beast realized what was happening. If I don't take these bugs out now, I'm done for, it must have thought. With the last of its energy, the croco beast made a run for it, charging towards the centipedes. But those centipedes, they were ready. Boom! The huge battle began, centipedes versus croco beast. But deep down, the croco beast knew it was running on empty. It was fighting just to bring down one more centipede before it collapsed. And after Anthony's earlier acid attack, the croco beast was seriously struggling, and then the inevitable happened. With a bam, the croco beast's strength just gave out. It fell hard to the ground and went unconscious. Seeing this, Anthony couldn't help it. A big smirking smile spread across his face. He could feel his heart pounding in his tiny ant chest. This is perfect. Now there was just one thing left to do. Anthony had to make his last acid shot count, hit the right place at the right time. Anthony had thought it all out. The moment the centipedes are about to kill the croco beast, I'll strike. Take them all out and snag those sweet, sweet experience points. Thinking this, Anthony turned his tiny ant butt around, positioning himself behind the centipedes. With a splat, he let out a powerful acid blast, but that shot, it ended up hitting the same centipede he'd hit twice before. The centipede let out a scream of pain, loud, and then fell to the ground. But the other two centipedes, they didn't stop. They sank their teeth into the croco beast and tore it apart, finishing it off. With that, Anthony watched, waiting for a notification. He noticed he'd damaged both the croco beast and the centipede. But since the centipedes had given the final blow to the croco beast, no system notification for experience points popped up for him. So that's how it works, huh? Anthony realized. Whoever lands the last hit gets all the experience points. Fine, if that's the case, Anthony thought. I should get all the points for the centipede I took down. Ding! There it was. A system notification. Anthony has defeated a level 3 claw centipede. And with that, Anthony had gained experience points. He felt a rush of joy. He had barely done much damage to that centipede, barely touched it. Those centipedes had huge HP, like 50, 60 points or more. To take one down, Anthony would have needed to shoot acid 10, 11 times, which was almost impossible. They were way too fast for that. If he had tried shooting even once, they'd have been on him in seconds. But thanks to the Croco Beast doing 90% of the damage, Antony only had to finish off 10%. And boom, all the experience points were his. Antony was thrilled. He had just found a new way to level up. Looking down at the fallen centipedes, Antony muttered, "Curse your father, stupid centipedes! Wiggling dirty worms," he added under his breath. Then, ding! A new notification. Stealth mode upgraded to level 5. Hell yeah! Antony thought, feeling proud. He'd been in stealth for so long, it had finally paid off. Antony gave a quick silent prayer to Gandalf and thanked him for the blessings. And then the scene shifts. We see TPS and Alberton in the middle of their usual bickering, insulting each other as they always did. After that, the serious meeting kicks off, and Titus gives his report to the Queen. Titus explains that, according to him, the mana levels within the dungeon are skyrocketing, rising really quickly. And if this continues, the dungeon will break within 4 days. And on top of that, the hunters on guard have witnessed a monster ant getting closer to the surface. Due to the special nature of this ant, the hunters intend to advance deeper into the dungeon and exterminate the entire ant colony. That's why they are heading deeper, to wipe out every ant down there. To make this happen, the hunter is formally requesting military aid from the Queen. Titus explains that if they want to advance this project, then the Queen will have to provide more military support. They need assistance in securing the city from the potential wave, because if the dungeon breaks, the city outside will be completely destroyed. After hearing all this, the entire meeting hall gets tense. The Queen gets up from her chair, moving slowly to stand in front of Titus. Titus bows his head, and the Queen asks, "Are you confident that you can exterminate the ant nest of this new intelligent ant?" Titus responds with confidence. They are the Deep Legion Abbas, and for over 3,000 years, in all of the land of Pangera, one fact has always been true. Underground, nobody can match their strength. As soon as Titus says this, we see another woman. Her name is Cornea. Then the scene shifts, and we see Antony standing in front of the centipede's dead body, his face filled with disgust. The centipede and the crocodile monster had fought each other, and the croc had turned the centipede into this mess. "Man, these remains are hideous," Antony muttered. But he knew what he had to do. He needed biomass. Didn't matter how disgusting it was. Antony took a deep breath. He walked up to the body, took a big old bite, and said. He sank his teeth in and ate the whole piece. But oh boy, no matter how much Antony tried to convince himself that this meat might taste good, it was awful. He hesitated, thinking maybe he should quit, but then his own human form started abusing him in his head. "What, you want to starve to death, Antony? Or are you going to eat this pile of disgusting centipede?" Antony sighed. Fine. With a heavy heart, like a stone sitting in his chest, he ate the entire disgusting piece of meat, every last bite. Finally, somehow, Antony managed to get it all down, and then he collapsed, lying on the ground, totally wiped out. Suddenly, ding! The system woke him up. Antony has gained biomass! A small, tired smile spread across his face. At least it wasn't for nothing, he thought. And with that, this episode comes to a close. What do you think, folks? Will Antony be able to evolve? Will he be able to become the boss of this dungeon? Form his own ant colony? We'll find out next time. So if you want more, like and subscribe. And don't forget to write chili sauce in the comments. All right then. Goodbye.